Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Michelle Bias with this breaking news. The state capitol is on lockdown at this hour following shots fired there.
One 24-year-old suspect has been apprehended. He was apprehended about 12:15 shortly after several gunshots were fired right here on the south steps of the state capitol.
So for the very latest, let's go to Ron Olivera, who's live at the Capitol with more. Ron.
Jason and Michelle, a very tense afternoon here at the state capitol in downtown Austin. A gunman fired several shots at the state capitol shortly after noon this afternoon, and the capitol was put on lockdown at that time. KITV's Ryan Lloyd joins me now. He's been following this story all afternoon. So, Ryan, what did you find out?
Well, Ron, we have confirmed the gunman is 24-year-old Fausto Cardenas from the Houston area. Shortly after he fired several shots at the south steps of the capitol here, troopers pinned him to the ground, and Cardenas has been taken to the Travis County Jail just blocks away from where I'm standing. Now, troopers locked the capitol down after all of this unfolded. That means staff members inside had to stay there. Today, I talked with one eyewitness who saw what happened. Jill Magid says she's visiting Austin from New York studying surveillance systems. She told me she saw troopers rush past her in the Capitol Rotunda trying to chase the suspect down. Magid saw how the troopers apprehended Cardenas.
I was leaving from the ground floor, and all of a sudden I saw two of the guards within the building running, holding their weapons, running down the hallway.
Evidence markers all along the steps out here. They've since been removed. Obviously, still investigation underway here. We do have some pictures of what happened after he fired those shots because DPS officers surrounded him very quickly. These pictures were sent to us by a viewer. You can see the troopers there kneeling around him, trying to surround the suspect. At one point, they stood him up, and then they carried him down the steps outside of the Capitol to get away from this scene so that they could secure the scene. We are also getting the very first picture of 24-year-old Fausto Cardenas. This is what he looks like. This is his mugshot that was taken a little while ago at the jail tonight. We will learn more about him here in just a little bit, but first we want to join my colleague Martin Bartlett. He has been looking into this investigation all throughout the day, and he has more information on what he heard from witnesses today. Martin?
Terry, the Capitol grounds and the Capitol Rotunda were absolutely full of people, just packed with people when those shots rang out.
I was leaving from the ground floor, and all of a sudden I saw two of the guards within the building running, holding their weapons.
What ended outside started on the third floor of the Capitol in the office of Houston Republican Senator Dan Patrick. Staffers say the gunman went into Patrick's office on the third floor, demanded to speak in private to an employee, and left.
There are still a lot of questions that surround the shooter, 24-year-old Fausto Cardenas, who he is, where he's from, what he was doing here at the Capitol today.
This is video of Cardenas being brought into the central booking at the Travis County Jail shortly after he was arrested at the Capitol. He's dressed in a white T-shirt with his hands handcuffed behind his back and covered with a green jacket. Investigators in Travis County say they had to wait to confirm his identity until he was fingerprinted. I can tell you public records indicate Cardenas has no previous criminal history.
Here's a closer look at Cardenas. He's facing a charge of deadly conduct and discharging a firearm. We still have not heard what provoked him that led to him firing several shots.
Jill Magid saw Cardenas being apprehended.
I couldn't see what he looked like or anything. It was definitely a man. I just saw his arms and the position he was in, but there was quite a low huddle of people around him, of the troopers and stuff.
Magid says she saw troopers rush past her on their way to the third floor where the alleged gunman entered a state senator's office. Shortly after that, DPS officials say the shooter ran outside, followed by troopers nearby. They pinned him down and took him into custody.
I'm much more scared now than I was when it was happening. Like, sort of, you start playing through your head of like how random it is.
The Capitol is a building free of scrutiny, allowing people to enter without metal detectors. Today's shooting forced the Capitol building to go on lockdown. Troopers stood outside armed to keep people out.
DPS says the suspect is a 24-year-old from the Houston area. They were able to take the man into custody. You can see that in these pictures taken by Vita Burtis. Her office overlooks the South Lawn. Burtis says she saw officers handcuff the man. When he started resisting, he was carried away. Another Capitol visitor describes the scene she saw.
I saw two guards on either side of the hallway running to the door. There was a huddle of state troopers and guards and cops on one guy.
The man accused of opening fire outside the state capitol was back in court this morning.
Fausto Cardenas of Houston remains in custody awaiting his trial. Today he got some new legal representation. Midday reporter Jessica Vest is live at the Travis County Justice Complex. Jessica.
Hi, Melissa. Cardenas is facing a third-degree felony. The lawyer now representing him says his family asked for his help. Fausto Cardenas walked into the 427th District Court just after 10 o'clock this morning. He wore a black and white striped jail suit and held his hands clasped behind his back as he approached Judge Jim Coronado. Cardenas is now represented by Stephen Orr, who stood by his side before the judge. The court interpreter was also there. She translated what Judge Coronado said in English to Spanish to ensure he understood what was being said. Cardenas even signed papers acknowledging the change in his legal representation. Two of his family members were in court this morning, sitting in the courtroom benches behind him watching. A woman who was at the Capitol the day Cardenas allegedly opened fire, also there sitting on the same bench. She was in town visiting from New York that day, and she flew in again this week to see these proceedings.
It's such a strange story that he just went out onto the steps and shot up into the air 4 or 5 times, and the only thing that I can read about it is that and his name, and I'm just interested what would make someone do that, so somehow it made me want to come back.
Well, Cardenas is in jail with charge of making a terroristic threat. He is in there on a $100,000 bond, a bond his family has not yet been able to pay. He is expected back in court in about 3 weeks, which his lawyer says gives him time to review the case fully. No trial date has yet been set.
Coming up, the man accused of firing shots on the steps of the Capitol enters a plea in court.
A possession of a weapon on a prohibited place. How, sir, do you plead?
Guilty.
The man who fired off that gun on the south steps of the Capitol last year won't have to spend much longer in jail. Fausto Cardenas admitted his guilt to a Travis County judge this morning, was sentenced to 180 days in jail. He's already served more than a year and a half. The shooting last January was enough to get the attention of lawmakers who did call for tighter security. They got their wish. Metal detectors were installed at the Capitol's entrances. Shooting also got the attention of some people from out of state, too. One woman.
It's such a huge action with such dire consequences, with no gain that makes logical sense, that it's fascinating, and then it has this massive repercussion on the state, and the government uses it as a way to arm itself even more.
Nobody was hurt in the shooting. And the man who fired those shots on the south steps of the Capitol a year and a half ago now knows his punishment. Our own Loriana Hernandez tells us about that and introduces us to a woman for whom the case has become a part of life.
On those same steps, witnessing it all, Jill Magid of New York.
I was here on my way to the tower that Charles Whitman shot at, so it's incredibly weird.
Since then, she hasn't taken her eyes off the case, almost developing what some might call an obsession, making at least 8 trips to Texas to follow Cardenas' case.
I don't want to ask him why he did it. I just wanted to.
Cardenas pled guilty and was sentenced to 180 days in jail and 5 years probation. His lawyer says that Cardenas isn't crazy. He just wasn't thinking clearly last January, and that he's had time to get rehabilitated. At least one other person seems to agree.
I don't think he's a dangerous person. I was never scared for my own life.
That was Loriana Hernandez. On September 8th, the judge will decide what the conditions of probation will be for Cardenas.